We're going to start with developments with the I-70, I-35 serial killer, 30 years in the making. There is movement in that case tonight. As we join you, what's developing is perhaps the most dramatic advancement in the serial killer case from the early 90s.
DNA results are back on evidence in a nearly 30-year homicide investigation. This is all a part of the I-70 serial killer cases.
Good morning, everyone. I am RJSMITH, and this is Crazy News Reacts. Welcome aboard. Today, I want to talk about some movement in the I-70 serial killer case. Now, it's been going on for decades and decades, since 1992, and there's never been any really good leads on this until recently. DNA has been identified of the killer. Just need the person.
Police say a man killed 6 people along the interstate in a short period of time in 1992. The local victim in Terre Haute was Michael McCowan. Someone shot and killed him in his family's ceramic store on South 3rd Street.
An unidentified American serial killer. He's known to have killed 6 convenience store clerks back in 1992. And the reason he was called the I-70 serial killer is because bodies showed up along that interstate. His victims were usually young, petite, although one of the victims was indeed a man. And whoever this elusive murderer is, in 1993 in the state of Texas, he shot 3 clerks in that state, and one of the people survived. And then later they find out that in Terre Haute, Indiana, maybe as late as 2001. So this guy is still out there. 23 years later, no leads have been found. And this despite these murders were carried heavily 60 minutes. Unsolved mysteries. And although he's never been captured, they now believe that they have DNA. Let's go.
The I-70, I-35 killer's trails span the Midwest, including a murder in St. Charles. Now, multiple sources tell News 4 another unsolved case nearly 10 years later could be added to the killing spree.
And this is all good news. I mean, when you have DNA, you can run it through all of the systems in law enforcement. But on top of that, these DNA companies, is it 16andMe, 19andMe, something like that, 19andMe, Ancestry, places like that that take your DNA, the cops have access to all that. You wouldn't think that when you're getting your own family tree done, but actually this helps law enforcement because it goes in to the DNA database. But you also have to believe, you also have to think that, wow, this is 30 years ago. Except for the 2001 case. These are old cases. Before DNA was around, when they just went off fingerprints and palm prints. I mean, I think, you know, across 4 or 5 states, this murderer was doing his business. You know, finding a serial killer ain't easy. You know, usually the FBI serial killer task force are the people who handle this sort of thing when an interstate connection is determined. So a body from Texas is found and a body in Indiana is found, very similar to the way other bodies have been killed. Very similar to the way other bodies have been discovered in Raytown, St. Charles, Terre Haute, Indiana, and you know, Texas. But this guy hasn't been heard from in 23 years. Is he still alive?
This video, take a look, from 20 years ago in Terre Haute, is the first time eyes in the St. Louis area are seeing it. And that man you see there in the black, police believe might be our serial killer.
This is a great video, don't get me wrong. However, let's remember, it's 20 years old, so it's not going to help with a description. Though they can age progress these things, they're not even 100% sure that this guy is a killer. There's so many unanswered questions. Let's continue.
Well, today investigators took a strong line saying they really believe they're going to solve this case, and they're questioning if this Terre Haute murder case will be part of the connection they need to get that done.
We've all heard of wishful thinking. It's very unlikely you are going to catch a criminal or serial killer that hasn't struck in 23 years. If you haven't heard from a criminal or a killer or anybody in that amount of time, police assume a few things. First, is in jail or prison, and those are two very different things, by the way. Jail, you go to before a conviction. Prison is after the conviction. It drives me nuts when people in movies and TV say he's in jail or whatever, and then go visit this guy in a closed booth room. Give me a freaking break. TV is not the way to learn your stuff. If you're watching Law and Order, that shit is just phony, okay? This guy is gonna be very tough to catch after 3 decades. Although, look at the BTK killer, right? Same kind of thing. They caught him decades later because he decided to write a letter to the media after decades. Maybe good killers, but they're not very intelligent. Sorry, they just aren't.
They say they found similarities between the I-70 killings and the murder of Billy Brossman, which happened almost 10 years later. Brossman was working at a convenience store when he was shot. As it turns out, that store is 7 blocks from one of the 1992 murders linked to the I-70 killer.
Investigators are always going to be very happy about 2 homicide victims ending up in relatively the same area as other murders. This can be done by killers just to throw off the scent. If you were going to be a serial killer and you didn't want to get caught, you wouldn't write to the press, you wouldn't brag, you wouldn't want to be on the news. You just want to do your thing and get on with life, right? I mean, really, that's what it is, right? So if I were to be a serial killer, then I would probably kill other people in the same area to make police believe I live in the area. So this guy could be traveling to another city, county, state, or province. We don't know. But he could also be from that area. Either way, here we are decades later, still asking the same questions.
Investigators said they had a person of interest but wouldn't give more details, saying they ultimately want closure for the families.
They still mourn over this loss. I'm sure all the families do. So just to bring closure for those families, to know what happened and know who was responsible for taking their loved one's life would be tremendous.
In 2013, I wrote a best-selling novel called The Santa Claus Killer. And I mentioned a couple other very famous serial killers, not just in our country, but around the globe. One of them was the Long Island serial killer, or Lisk. Actually did a lot of research and a lot of writing about this killer. This guy was dropping bodies on the side of the Long Island Expressway, the LIE. And look, the guy's gotten away for decades. Until recently, Mr. Rex Howerman was identified as a serial killer in Long Island, and he's currently in custody. I believe he's got 4 bodies on him right now, but there are almost a dozen bodies. It was a big case for me back in the day when I was writing that book. Check it out if you haven't, Santa Claus Killer.
This comes days after the FBI and several police departments formed a task force to take a closer look at these cases. Investigators are also showing renewed hope that DNA evidence will help. They're hoping to compare evidence that each department has.
The Department of Justice, which is in charge of the FBI and other federal law enforcement agencies, are always involved in serial killer cases. They have analysts, they have behavioral analysts, they have all kinds of trackers, and imagine what the FBI must bring to the table when looking for someone. In serial killer cases, it's very unique because you could be talking about a task force of more than 100 people. It gets that big. A guy like Dahmer, there was hundreds of people on that task force. I think here in Florida, you would have to go back to Ted Bundy. BTK, right? Yeah. So BTK, bind, torture, kill. BTK, killer, that was his name. He was burying boys in his basement. I mean, we're talking about dozens. This guy was actually like a police officer and worked in the county and all kinds of crazy shit. Check out BTK killer. If I was to mention 3 top serial killers of mine, it would be Albert Fish, way back in the day. Ted Bundy would be another one. Jeffrey Dahmer is my 3rd. And I would have to say the 4th would be Richard Ramirez, Night Stalker out in California. Although we can't forget about the son of Sam. That fucker was sick.
Here's what's new for you this afternoon. DNA results are back on the piece of evidence that the Terre Haute Police Department sent away for testing earlier this year. However, due to the active investigation, local investigators are not sharing the results from the testing.
You know, we're talking about the Federal DNA Unit, or FDDU, and that aids in investigations through hit confirmations on DNA. So when DNA is entered into the database, It is run against all criminal data, and they are hoping that they'll get a hit. And you know, every criminal has to submit their blood upon a conviction, or DNA swab will do it, right? Under United States law for about 10 years now, anyone convicted of a felony DNA is taken. And even some people who are under investigation have to give it up, but they would need a search warrant for that.
They say this is because there are several agencies that have evidence being processed right now or soon will, and they do not want to jeopardize any of the ongoing investigations.
They don't want to release the information. That's cop speak, or shut the fuck up, motherfucker. Leave us alone, motherfuckers. We are working. No, once they identify that DNA to a person, they usually do release that to the media, and they find people very quickly. Relatives often turn in people, believe it or not. Because think about it. Whether you're a murderer or robber, no matter what crime you might have committed, you're screwed, right? Especially if they have your biologics. So fingerprints, DNA, blood samples, hair samples, all that stuff is DNA related. So trying to find the I-70 killer, you guys. Maybe you have some information about it. I'm just presenting. Thanks for taking this journey with me. I was going to do a piece on Rex Hauerman, the serial killer in Long Island who was caught. But you know, everybody's doing that. If you want to see something on that, I can dig and bring up something and maybe some details that haven't been published. So leave a like, please subscribe. I need you to subscribe. Very important. 81% of our audience here is not subscribed. Kind of weird. Hit that subscribe button. Helps us a lot. Hit that like button. And if you so desire, leave a comment down below. See you tomorrow.